Hey there, everybody. It's Josh Wagner here. I hope that you are having a great day. Just waiting for everybody to get into the rooms if you are here on the live. And um, Great to see everybody. Let's check in. If you're in the live, tell me where you're from. Tell me where you're from in the live. And if you're watching the recording, you can send that as well. It doesn't really make any difference. I'm from Columbus, Ohio. We might have a lot of Columbus people here. But as you're getting checked in, just make sure your chat's working. Make sure all that's working. Hey, Christina, how are you doing? It's great to see you. Great to see you. Everybody, just check in, drop something in the chat box there. All right, we've got Oregon. That's great. It's nice to have you here, Sherry. We'll just give another minute to everybody who's getting in here. You can see my beautiful slide there with my favorite picture in my kitchen. I use that picture a lot because, when you find a picture you like, you need to use it to death, right? All right, Columbus, Ohio. Great to have you here, Christina. Real pleasure to have you here. Actually, then it means a lot, so it's good. All right, everybody. So we're talking about overcoming traumatic experiences, and so hey, Michelle, how you doing? Oh, it's so cool. It's such a neat thing that we can do this kind of stuff. Um, so we're talking about traumatic experiences, which is kind of my bread and butter. I try to diversify the topics that we have on a weekly basis, but when I was going in hypnotherapy, I didn't know exactly like which niche I was going to. Lorraine, it's great to see that you're here. I just sent you a text a few minutes ago. So just I did everything. I did smoking. I did healthy habits. I did all sorts of stuff, and this has just always been kind of something near and dear to my heart. So this is really what I do. I have another group that meets at 8:30 on Wednesday nights, and it's a Zoom room group. It meets after I do the recording of this, and it's powerful. I've seen transformations happen in that group. We do both group stuff and individual stuff. Hi, Stephanie, how you doing? And it's really powerful to watch people make that change. It's like almost nothing happens for a little while, and all of a sudden this switch flips, and they have this major transformation. So hopefully that transformation starts for you tonight. Hi, Don. How you doing? And so this material is really good. It's based on a lot of things. I would say that the primary text that I think everybody uses is a book called The Body Keeps the Score. I do highly recommend that book. That book, he actually talks about hypnosis in that book. It's a hard read. I actually had to take breaks while I was reading that book, only because it was such a difficult thing to hear some of the stories he talked about, to hear some of the things that are going on. But I've also done a lot of other reading, research, trainings on trauma. And when I do my trainings for hypnotherapy, I do train hypnotherapists as well. I have an emphasis on trauma recovery because everybody has trauma. So let's just start there. There's some experience that we've all had that has completely and totally overwhelmed our ability to process it, our ability to handle it, our ability to do anything. And we're going to talk about some of the effects of that. We're going to talk about how to sort of overcome that, how to heal from that. We're going to talk about traumatic memories just a little bit. This is, like I said, this is an overview of what we're doing. We'll do just a little bit of a meditation at the end so that we can all feel really, really good at the end and have a great night, or if you're watching the recording, a great rest of your day whenever you're watching this. So let's get into the right frame of mind. Let's just find a spot to stare at right now. Just find a spot to stare at on the wall. I was actually teaching one of my hypnotherapy students this. You can also look at something on the screen here. I have lots of fun things in my background here. Just find something to stare at. And just notice your breathing. Just notice your breathing. Breathe in any peace and calm. Breathe out any tension. And when you're ready to relax and really relax and just be very open to all the things that are going to be taught this evening in this session, just let your eyes close comfortably. And relax those eyes all the way down. And as you relax those eyes all the way down, you can just let your whole body relax now too. Just let go of the cares of the world. And one of the metaphors I've been given by a teacher of mine. So I want you to imagine that you're grabbing a large sponge and you're squeezing that sponge, and all the water's leaking out of that sponge into the sink and down the drain. And that's your stress leaving your body now. Just imagine what it would be like to be able to squeeze all the stress out of your body. Just let it all go. And just notice as you imagine yourself squeezing that sponge that all that stress and tension's just going down the drain where it's gone forever. Until that sponge is perfectly squeezed out, perfectly dry. Just let it happen all by itself. It's all the stress of the day. It's all the stress of the last week, of the last month. There's no need to try. Just let it happen all by itself. And just notice as you squeeze that sponge where something changes in your body. Maybe you just notice a little muscle just relaxing, or maybe a whole part of your body. Just let it all go. That's right. In a moment, I'm going to count from 1 to 5. And when I say 4, you can open your eyes. And when I say 5, you come back and we'll have a great presentation. 1, 2, 3, 4, open your eyes, and 5. All the way back. To full waking consciousness. So if you're watching anywhere else, YouTube or Facebook, there's a link there you should follow to make sure you can chat with us here in the main room. Lots of different options for this sort of thing. If you have any questions, please put them in. I will address them as I can. And if you are watching a recorded version of this, I will get those questions in my email and I will respond to you as soon as I possibly can. We're talking about trauma, though. And, I think trauma is... I think everybody's got it at some point, folks. So you're not alone. I think that's the number one thing. The first thing I can tell you is that you're not alone. And trauma is an emotional response to distressing events and that overwhelms one's ability to cope. So you're overwhelmed. You can only handle so much, and your cup is just runneth over, and not in a good way. And it can cause all sorts of feelings of helplessness. It can cause feelings of unworthiness. Like, why wasn't I stronger? It can cause feelings of a diminished sense of yourself. And I was thinking about this the other day. I was thinking about this because the anniversary is coming up. About 5 years ago. I think it was maybe even 5 years ago today. I have to check as I'm recording this. I had a really bad car accident. And it doesn't take years and years of stuff to be traumatized. That one split second of a car accident, all of a sudden I had to go see the doctor for the next 6 weeks. I had to talk to the insurance companies. I actually got a lawyer and had to go through that route. It was difficult. And 1 second. So it doesn't matter if it was years of repeated exposure to things you couldn't handle, or it could have been one spike of a moment. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by something that happened in your life, whether it was years of repeated exposure or one moment, write yes in the chat. Let everybody else know that everybody here has had some kind of experience with that. I'm going to write that in the chat myself because I've had that difficulty myself at times where I felt completely and totally overwhelmed. So you are not alone in anything that you are going through right now. Everybody gets overwhelmed. Everybody wishes. That's right. I'm getting a lot of yeses in there. That's right. That's right. A lot of people, every single person has some point in their life in which it was overwhelming, whether it was a teacher that told you it was something bad, an abusive parent, some physical trauma that happened to you that was physical stuff affects our emotional well-being as well. Anything that meets this criteria of being so overwhelming that it affects one's ability to cope. And also, it doesn't have to necessarily happen when we're kids. This is something that can absolutely happen anytime when we're an adult. And it only takes, like I said, 1 second. But we're going to have some good news. I'm not going to spoil the good news for you here. But every single person, and I want you to see this in the chat. And if you're watching the recording, about 15 people just wrote yes in there. So we're all in this together. We're all in this together. So let's talk about some of the physical effects of trauma. So trauma leads to brain changes. So it's really important. The amygdala becomes hyperactive. We'll talk about what that is here in a second. The prefrontal cortex is less active, and the hippocampus can produce fragmented memories. So if you read The Body Keeps the Score, which is a book that I highly recommend if you want to get even more into this. And there's lots of other literature out there, but I think that that's kind of one of the standard books. And if anybody has anything else that they've ever read that they would like to share with the group, either in the chat or you can email it to me, and I'll share it in the comments somewhere. But that's a great book. And one of the things that they talk about in that book is that your brain holds traumatic memories differently than it holds regular memories. Regular memories are very plastic. They're very changeable. That is, every time you remember something, it changes the memory. But that's not the case with traumatic memory. Every time you remember something in your traumatic that's traumatic, it actually reinforces the memory. So every time you remember it, it actually makes it worse. It actually can make it stronger. So you got to be really careful of any therapies, anything that re-expose you to the same trauma, the same way that you had it over and over and over again. There's a lot of good therapists out there, a lot of good doctors out there, but you got to be really careful. If all you do every week is come in to your sessions and talk about the same thing over and over and over again, that's not doing you any good. You got to ask your professional, whoever you're working with, that you want to move beyond that. You want to change the memory. We're going to talk about that here in just a little bit. The other thing that happens is that it mentions that the prefrontal cortex kind of slows down. Prefrontal cortex is where we have our conscious mind, our logical linear mind. That's the thing. And so we can't think as fast because our brain is always dealing with the trauma. And the other thing that happens is that the amygdala becomes hyperactive. The amygdala is where all of our emotions live. So when it comes to a traumatic memory, so this is how it works, everybody. When it comes to a traumatic memory, your brain does not know that it's imaginary, in the sense that it doesn't know that it's just a memory. Your brain actually will perceive it as if it's happening again, right now. And the more vivid the memory, the more profound the memory, the deeper that the memory had an effect on you, the more you're going to have a physiological reaction. So as it says in the slide there, the amygdala is just firing like crazy. It becomes hyperactive. You're producing a whole bunch of different emotions. So what's going on when we are suffering, particularly from PTSD, CPTSD, whatever nomenclature you want to put it, is that our brains are highly emotional because they are responding to these traumatic memories that are fragmented and solidified, and you're not thinking quite straight because the front part of your brain actually shuts off. Now, what's going on here? This is a panic response. This is an anxiety response. Anybody that's had trauma probably has some anxiety around whatever caused that trauma. Now, some people are traumatized worse than others. And let me tell you this too, we can't compare our traumas. What's traumatic for one person isn't necessarily traumatic for another person. There's a saying that says the same boiling water that hardens the potato softens the egg. No, flip that and reverse it. The same boiling water that softens the potato hardens the egg. So when somebody says something to you and you're like, well, doesn't sound very traumatic, to them at the moment that they were experiencing this trauma over years or that moment of their life, and it can happen in that split second, can be very severe depending on where they were cognitively at the time, where they were developmentally, where they were mentally at the time, whether they were distracted or not, whether in the severity of it. So we can identify with other people that have trauma, but we can't ever compare our trauma to theirs. My trauma is worse than theirs. Well, it might not be inside of their head, because the way that the person perceives the trauma is the most important. So has anybody ever had, and I know that you're welcome to share this or not share this, and I will share mine too. Has anybody out there ever had a moment in which they just got overwhelmed by something that happened in their past and they relived it as if it was happening right now? And it caused a physiological reaction throughout your entire body. Remember, your brain does not know that this trauma is not real. If you've ever had that experience, write heck yes, or just yes. You don't have to write the heck part in the comments. Yeah, and that's right. Somebody said, and how long it can last. So we're going to talk about we're going to talk about the remedy for that here in a few minutes. But I wanted to tell you this because I understand. I personally used to have panic attacks twice a day. I would get up at 4 in the morning. I wake up at 4 in the morning, and my dog Benji would actually have to comfort me. I get up at 4 in the morning and freak out for about 45 minutes, and I have another one at 2 in the afternoon. And I will tell you that all those things that we talked about in that last slide, right now, daily, you're frozen. All right. I hear you. I will tell you that I was not thinking straight because I had all sorts of weird thoughts going through my mind, from being audited by the IRS to all the teeth falling out of my head, all sorts of crazy stuff that I was thinking at 4 in the morning. They were totally irrational. The front part of my brain was not working. But those inside parts, the emotional parts, the memories, the vivid memories of things that were happening were absolutely so real to my brain that I was having a physical reaction to it. I suspect that other people here, and getting some yeses in here, have had that same experience. Now, don't worry, we're going to talk about how to start calming that down, because I think it's really, really important for us to understand that this is something that can be remedied here. So how about our bodies? So after trauma, the body shows signs like increased heart rate, hyper alertness, and muscle tension. Persistent reactions can lead to fatigue and sleeping problems. Does anybody have fatigue and sleeping problems? Oh, yes, John. Yes, at flashbacks. So essentially what I'm talking about, John, that's a great thing. Somebody in the live just said flashbacks. Yeah, so you're essentially, anytime, and it's varying levels of flashbacks as well. Anytime that you're having reliving a traumatic memory, it's essentially a flashback that your brain does not know is real or not real or is imagined. It's just a memory. No, when I say real or not real, I'm just talking about that it's in your imagination and not happening outside of you right now. That's all I mean by that. It's very, very real to you. And the thing is that you may not even remember it very accurately, but the way you remember it, however you remember what happened, whether it's accurate or inaccurate, doesn't really make any difference. It's real to your brain, and you have those flashbacks that absolutely occur all the time. Exhausted. Yeah, it's exhausting. That's right. Hardly sleep or sleep too much. Yeah, interesting. Fatigue even with sleeping too much. Yeah, that's a hard pill to swallow there, because your body is on constant alert. It's almost like your smoke detector is turned up all the way so that when you burn toast, the smoke detector goes off at the slightest bit of smoke. Okay, well, Julie, we should probably talk then. If you're only getting 4 hours a night and needing a nap, maybe we should talk at some point. So your body, when you're having these physiological reactions, so I want to make a metaphor, and I usually teach this to my hypnosis students, but this is a good metaphor. If you tell a 5-year-old kid that Santa Claus is outside waiting on him in his sleigh out in front of his house, do you think that kid is going to have a physical reaction in his body? And the answer, of course, is yes, absolutely. That kid's going to have a physiological reaction. Their heart rate's going to go up. They're going to breathe faster. They're going to have all sorts. They're going to jump and run around. And it's just a thought. Now, you and I as adults know that Santa Claus isn't out there. But that thought to that child creates a physical reaction in their body. Well, the same thing happens to us when we get into a traumatic situation or we relive our trauma, or as John talked about. Yeah, I'm glad you guys are supporting each other. That's really good. Is that our bodies actually do keep the score, as the book is mentioning, and we actually can hold that trauma in our bodies. Now, this is a wild part that I'm getting this a little bit from Joe Dispenza, if you know who that is. But when your body produces has the traumatic memory, and it sends those chemicals down to your body, it says, hey, get ready. You turn up all of your anxiety, turn up all of your fight or flight, turn up all those things. Your muscles tense, your adrenaline fires off. Your body gets inflamed with inflammation and tension because it's got to get ready for this fight or flight that's going on. Yeah, Heather. So dreams are dreams are just another way your PTSD can bring up those memories. Just another way, absolutely. In fact, I know I have people that I work with that have PTSD dreams, and as they get better, the dreams actually start to change, which is actually pretty cool. So You get into this hyper alertness, and what happens is that if you're in that constant state of trauma and anxiety, your body literally gets habituated to the chemicals that are sent, the norepinephrine, the adrenaline, all those kind of things. And even when you're not, so it gets addicted like an alcoholic or a heroin addict gets addicted to alcohol or heroin. And if you're feeling okay up in your head and your body's not getting those chemicals, your body will actually start to tell your brain to panic and to think about those things so that the brain sends down the signals to produce the chemicals. So your body actually starts to tell your brain what to do because it gets habituated. So you can be addicted. You can be addicted to any emotions. You can be addicted to anxiety. You can be addicted to the trauma response. And what I mean addicted is that your body just isn't normal without it. Interesting, yeah. Trauma dreams where you're trying to solve something that keeps moving or changing before you get to it or fix it. It's interesting. It's interesting. So we're almost done with the bad news, right? This is the difficult. This is what happens. And is anybody relating to this that's in the room here? Is anybody relating to this that's in the room or having this experience? There's a lot of people here tonight. There's about 40 people here tonight. And in the live. And does anybody else relate to this? Because I sure do. Again, I was having 2-a-day panic attacks, and on the outside, I'm a very confident dude, and I'm still pretty confident. I was always confident, but I will say that I don't have any panic attacks or anything anymore. Yes, some people are saying yes. John says, "Do you have to consciously remember trauma to be affected? Doesn't it run in the background?" Yes. You don't have to be conscious. It's all running in the background. Yes, absolutely. Everybody's really has had that feeling. You do not have to be conscious of the trauma because your unconscious mind, and that's what we talked about those things like the amygdala. That's what we talked about those things like your hippocampus, your prefrontal cortex. In fact, the conscious part of your brain actually shuts down a little bit, John, which is the PFC, the prefrontal cortex. So you don't have to be conscious of it. It's always running in the background because it's constantly looking for that danger. Trauma is actually, oddly enough, here to help us. It's here to help us survive so that we don't go back to the same situations. But if it gets locked in and it keeps cycling and getting worse and worse and worse, you don't have to be conscious of it because your brain is just set automatically for that fight or flight mode all the time, and your body gets addicted to it. So most people are not conscious of the trauma operating underneath the surface. Most people are unaware of it, and a lot of trauma is unresolved because as kids we learn all these coping mechanisms, we learn all these soothing mechanisms, we learn how to, yeah. I get that. Some people are saying I relate. I hate that protection mode. Yeah. So oddly enough, trauma is there to help us, but when it's wired like this, it's not doing much for us at all. And so it manifests in all sorts of anxiety disorders. I had an anxiety disorder, and some of it, I will say that some of it is genetic too, because my family on my dad's side is predisposed to anxiety and depression because of some family history. So you can be genetically predisposed to it as well. I think that there's some evidence to that as well. But I don't have, and I'm going to tell you, well, I'll save the good news for here in the next slide. I don't, anxiety disorders, PTSD, generalized anxiety, panic disorders, and phobias due to altered brain states. So phobias always start before the age of 9. That's because you have no prefrontal cortex that's really developed to handle that kind of stuff. So I know that we all kind of, if we're here, we're probably all suffering from that. So let me just be very clear. I had anxiety disorder for a long time. When I was younger, it manifested itself in migraine headaches. And then when I turned 25, it manifested itself. You can get it from your family. Well, because I don't think it's, genetic is probably a little too strong. You're a product of your environment. And if people have a lot of anxiety in your environment, you're going to have a lot of anxiety too. That comes from Ernst Becker and his book on, it's not Man's Search for Meaning. It's Birth and Death of Meaning. Where he talks about we inherit the neuroses of our parents. But that's a whole nother time. So we can actually inherit our parents' trauma as well. If our parents are constantly in a trauma response mode, then we actually can inherit that as well. That could be the trauma that we inherit. That there might not have been anything that actually specifically happened to you, but you inherited some trauma that got passed through your family. That happened to my family as well. My great-grandfather ended his own life. I never knew him, of course. It was a long time ago. But that spread throughout our entire family. And so on the Weber Wagner side of the family, my grandma's side of the family, on my dad's side, there's often a lot of that stuff going on in our family. Even my cousins that I'm not really all that close to all went through the same thing at the same time. So you can't get it from the family. But okay, so you're not in trouble. Julie said I'm in trouble. You're not in trouble. So this is why I'm here, everybody. This is why I'm here. You're not in trouble. I totally get it. You know, it's going to be, this is the good news about this whole business here, is that there is healing from trauma. There is healing from trauma. Healing from trauma often requires therapy, self-help strategies, and community support. And everybody's healing journey is unique. So I'm going to tell you mine really quick, and then we can talk about some strategies. Right. So I used to be in church work for most of my career. I left that in 2018. That's when actually the 4 o'clock in the morning panic attacks started. I didn't have them before that. I always had the 2 in the afternoon ones, but the 4 in the morning ones started after I left that work. And I was freaking out. I had no idea how I was going to make it in the world. I had no idea what I was going to do. So if you have panic attacks and on the regular, mine were on the hour, 4 o'clock and 2 o'clock, 4 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. And I was miserable. It was miserable. I was on Lexapro. I was in talk therapy and group therapy every week. It wasn't doing anything for me. And it was at the end of 2019, I met this guy named Tyler the hypnotist. And I had one session with him where I paid him a lot of money. And I was like, I had $11 in my account when I was done, but I was so desperate at that point. And after one session with him, my whole life started to turn around. I have not had a single panic attack since whenever that was. I think it was December of 19, right before COVID hit. I met him online, like I do all my work online. And I have not had a panic attack since. Now I've had anxiety since. Can't get rid of anxiety because anxiety is actually here to help us. But yeah, it's nice to know. It's nice to know you're not alone in this, right, Jennifer? It's nice to know. The support is a huge part of this whole thing. So how does it work? Why does it work this way? Well, so a couple things. One is the same mechanism that makes PTSD and chronic trauma so bad is the same mechanism in your brain that can actually heal it. So let me say that again. The same mechanism that causes trauma to be so bad, makes it so real, makes it so difficult, is the same mechanism that we actually use to heal it. And that mechanism is the fact that at a certain level, your brain does not know the difference between something that happened and something that's happening, I should say, and something you're imagining right now. You can use that same structure to your advantage, okay? So like that little kid, let's go back to that little kid that thinks Santa Claus is outside. In that kid's brain, that is so real that his heart starts beating, he starts breathing heavy, he runs around, jumps and shouts and all this kind of stuff. That thought is so real in his mind that it causes a physiological reaction. Well, what we do in hypnosis and hypnotherapy is that we kind of quiet down this part of your brain, the judgmental part of your brain. It's really here and on the left side of your brain. The conscious mind, the part that judges, the part that evaluates, the part that tells you whether something is real, is really happening, or the part that tells you that whether or not something is imagined. So we use the same process at the PTSD. And then what we go do is we do a couple different things. We will go and we will change the memory. That's one of my favorite ways to do PTSD is we change the memory. Remember what I said at the beginning. I'm giving you a lot of information here. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat if you're here live or send them to me. The box will also email me any questions and I'll get right back to you on the email if you're watching the recorded version. What happens is then is you can go in, if you recall at the beginning, I said traumatic memories don't change on their own. Every other memory changes on their own. Like I remember going back to college after I'd been gone for a while, and I thought to myself, I thought that the hallways were a lot smaller than this. Like I remember the hallways being cavernous, and I thought, it was only 3 or 4 months. It was summer vacation. I came back and I thought, well, that's not how I remembered it. Regular memories change, traumatic memories don't. So what we need to do in hypnosis, one of the ways that we do this in hypnosis is we go in and we expose you to the memory, but in a different way. We start changing deliberately using the same process. We start to change the memory. So, for instance, one of the things that we can do is we can remember the memory flipped backwards. We can remember the memory as if we're watching it in a mirror. And just that one little thing, when you go into hypnosis and you re-engage the memory, but you flip it, it will change the emotional reaction that you have to the memory. So let me give you a great example of this. Let's say that you're in a downtown metropolitan area and you see a terrible car crash. You see two cars hit and it's terrible and it's this worst, horrible thing that you saw. And you're going to be affected by it, right? You're going to see this car crash and you're going to be affected by it. But let's say that you see that same car crash for the first time. Let's say you say that same car crash for the first time on YouTube 5 years after it happened. So it's 5 years later. Instead of seeing it real life and right in front of you, you're watching it on your, I have my phone here. You're watching it on your cell phone, right? Do you think that that's going to have the same emotional impact watching it tiny on your phone that it had when you were standing on the corner 10 feet away from it and it was in living color? And the answer is, of course not. Of course not. Do you think it's going to be easier? Now, it still could be a bad car crash. It could still be something that could cause you some emotional stress or distress. But it's not going to be the same emotional distress that watching it on your cell phone 5 years later as it would be standing there and watching it live and in person. It can't be, because you're not there, you're not attached to it. You know, if I saw my car accident that I had 5 years ago, probably today, on film, I probably wouldn't feel the same way as if when I was in the car actually having the accident, right? If I saw it just as a bystander. So one of the things we can do in hypnosis is we can go in and we can actually change how the memory is encoded so that you don't feel the same thing. I've actually done this a lot with people where they keep the memory, but they have no emotional content about it. They can talk about it all day long after we do it. So one of the things, oh, you relive 9/11 every day and still feels like it's happening. Yeah, so 9/11 itself was a very big traumatic moment. I was actually living in Europe at the time, and I remember everything about where I was and what I was doing at the time. So another way that we help, and I'm almost done here, and then we'll just do a little bit of a meditation, just to sort of get you in this process. One of the other things that we do is that we give you resources that you didn't have before. When you had that traumatic moment, you had only had the resources at your disposal to handle that. But what we can do is throughout the hypnotic process, we can install things like confidence or resilience or any number of courage or boldness or quick thinking or any kind of those things that we'd say, well, what would it have been like to go through this traumatic experience with these resources? So we install those resources, and then when you have that memory, you see that traumatic memory, you have that traumatic experience through the lens of those resources and not without the resources. What eventually happens, and these are just a couple of interventions that we have. We do metaphorical interventions, we do all sorts of things. There's a bunch of things, but at the end of the day, what we're actually doing is we're rewiring the brain. And then what we're doing is we're going to attach a different physiological feeling to that. So that when you have that memory, you no longer react the way that you used to. You have the memory, but it's almost like taking it from standing in front of the car accident to seeing it on your phone in black and white 5 years later on YouTube. That process can happen very quickly. And there's this. I'm gonna kind of bring this back around. Remember, I told you that trauma can happen in a second. Trauma can happen in a second. A car accident, something going on. It can happen over years of time. But so can the healing, because we're using the same process that the brain used to encode the trauma to change the trauma. We're using the same process to encode the trauma as to change the trauma. So I'd love to take some questions, and then just a couple of questions if you have them here. I know this, we can't cover everything tonight. Obviously, this is going to be a long process. But while you're asking those questions, if you would like to book a session, if you feel like this is something that you'd like to talk to me about, you are more than welcome to do that. There's the link right there. You can go to that link right now if you'd like, and book. You won't lose the feed, or you shouldn't lose the feed. But if this is something that you would like to work on with me, and I've helped a lot of people. I'm currently helping a lot of people. We have about 20 people in the group right now in 8:30 Wednesday night group that are just, some people are doing going really fast. Some people are going a little bit slower, and that's perfectly fine. I've had a lot of success helping people. I've done it myself. If there's a habit that is affecting you in a bad way, that's probably coming from self-soothing or anxiety or trauma, we can also take care of some of those things as well. But you are very welcome to make that appointment if this is something that you would like to. And a couple of you in the live right now, please make an appointment with me. If you haven't ever had a free appointment with me, please make the appointment with me, and we can go over some of this stuff and see exactly how we can help you with that. Because that's really, really important for us to do this. You don't have to live with this. And one of the best compliments that I ever received from somebody, one of the best compliments is that they got more out of a session with 3 months working with me than they did 20 years of therapy. And not to put down talk therapy, but listen, go to talk therapy, take your medications. I actually got off of all of my medications. I was on Lexapro and I got off of it within about 3 months because I'm like, I don't need this anymore. And that was a long time ago. I also got out of talk therapy because I didn't need that anymore either. So yeah, please hop on there. I'll leave that up here. Does anybody have any questions or anything before we have a little meditation session, a little hypnosis, now we're not going to go too deep just because of the nature of this kind of one-way communication that we have. Or if you're watching the recorded version, you can do this as well. Does anybody have any questions before we do a little hypnosis? Anybody want to share an experience if you're in the live? And again, if you have something that you'd like to email me or share, the chat box will be like an email box if you're watching the recorded version of this. And you can email me those things and I will get right back to you as soon as I can. All right. Well, I know that there's just a little bit of a time delay between my talking and you putting stuff into the chat, but let's get into a mode where perhaps you can remember a traumatic event. I wouldn't pick the most traumatic event since this is why I'm not going to do too much since we're really not face to face, but pick an event that you'd like to change. Not the worst thing that's ever happened to you, but pick something that, I always use the example. I had a first grade teacher that made fun of me when I was a kid. And it was actually a traumatic experience for me, and I don't have any problems with it anymore. But something like that, nothing where you're going to be handling the worst situation. You need to see me one-on-one for the worst situation. You don't want to handle that by yourself. You need to have the support of me or the group that I run on Wednesday nights for all of that. But pick a kind of a minor memory that's kind of difficult. All right, so I want you to pick that beforehand, and we're gonna and maybe. Notice how you feel as you remember that memory. Thank you, Jennifer, for saying that. So I want you to pick that memory. I want you to notice what that memory does to you, if it has any effect on you. All right, so what I want you to do now is I want you to find that spot to stare at like we did at the beginning of the session. Find that spot. It could be something on the screen. It could be something in your field of vision. If you're holding a phone or a tablet or something, just let that to the side. You can hear me, as long as you can hear me. This time I'm gonna do something called the 10-second hypnotist, which is a very fast induction. I'm going to tell you in a moment here, I'm going to tell you to close your eyes and go into hypnosis. And what you're going to do is you're going to close your eyes and you're going to go into whatever hypnosis means for you. Some people feel heavy or tingly. Some people feel like they're going to fall asleep. Some people feel really inside of their body. Some people feel like they're floating above their body. I don't know what your experience of hypnosis is. Whatever you think hypnosis is, I'm going to have you close your eyes and go into hypnosis. Then I'm going to count backwards from 10 to 1. And with every number I count backwards with your eyes comfortably closed, I want you to double your relaxation. I just want you to choose to double your relaxation. Double your mental and physical relaxation. Okay, here we go. So staring at that spot right now, breathing normally. I'm going to tell you to close your eyes and go into hypnosis. And you're going to close your eyes and do whatever you think hypnosis is or whatever happens to you. Just let it happen. I'm going to count backwards from 10 to 1. And you'll double your relaxation with every number. You're ready. Here we go. Close your eyes and go into hypnosis now. That's right. Just notice what's happening throughout your body. Whatever's happening is right. You can't go into hypnosis wrong. You already did it. We already did it when we squeezed the sponge earlier. Now you just go a little bit deeper. I'm going to count backwards from 10 to 1. You can just Let your relaxation double with every number as I count 10, 9, 8, 7, twice as deep, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Just let go now. Just let it happen all by itself. Go all the way down. Relax those eyes to the point where they just won't open. Even if you tried to open them, they'd be so relaxed. They'd just be so hard to open them. You just want to let them be shut. Let that relaxation spread through your whole body. The top of your head to your face and jaw and your neck and shoulders. Just let your arms just hang there. Just lay there. Down your chest, your stomach. Down your legs. Just melt into the chair or the bed or whatever surface you're leaning on. Like you're a rag doll. Every muscle going loose and limp and relaxed. Every muscle going loose and limp and relaxed. Now what I want you to do is I want you just to imagine, as best you can, and if you can't see it clearly, that's okay. Just understand me. That's the most important thing. Imagine that you're floating out of your body and you're able to go back in time, floating back in time, seeing the watch hands spin backwards all the way back to that when that traumatic memory happened. Now again, we don't want to pick too serious of a memory. We're just going to use a light memory right now. The serious one's safer when we talk. And I want you to see yourself immediately after it happens. You don't have to worry about seeing it happening again. See yourself after it happened. Maybe you're recovering. Maybe you're in the hospital. Maybe you're alone in your room. And just kind of step into the scene. Step into the scene with that younger version of yourself. And empathize with them for just a second. What are they feeling? What are they thinking? What do they need? Just look at them as if they're right in front of you, this younger version of yourself, and see it from a whole different angle, a whole different lens. You have so many more resources today than you did back then. And I want you to bring those resources into the room. And almost like giving a gift to that version of yourself, that younger version of yourself. I want you to hand those resources over. Maybe you're more resilient than you ever used to be. Maybe you're wiser. Maybe you feel like protecting that younger version of yourself. Whatever you choose to do, whatever you choose to give them, you can give it to them symbolically, you can give it to them really. It's like you're handing them a ball of light. It represents that quality and that ability that you have now that you didn't have back then. Imagine how much that would help them. Imagine that past version of yourself standing up a little straighter, looking a little stronger, holding their head up a little higher no matter what happened. That you instill in them a belief that it is going to be okay, that you are going to make it through this. Just look at and just imagine that version of yourself just gaining that strength right in front of you. What would your life have been like if you had gotten this at that moment? If somebody had come back in time and given you everything that you needed at that moment? Look at the gratitude on that past version of yours face. And just for a moment, just imagine stepping into the body, just feeling differently about this right now, that now you have something that you didn't have back then that you so desperately needed, but you have it now. You're coping with it now. You have something different now. You're seeing it just slightly different than you did before now. And feel that strength welling up in your body and see that environment changing. You're seeing things differently. You're hearing things differently. You're feeling things differently. You have a new sense of hope that, in fact, I am going to make it. You say to yourself, you are going to make it. You say to yourself, you are going to make it. And somehow even it can transform. Just allow it to transform. From something that hurts so badly, something that was so overwhelming, to maybe something that is a source of power and strength. Just imagine what it would be like for just a moment. Standing straight and tall and back, empowered by some just magic that happened that you're able to come back and give to yourself. And now Now come back out of that body and see that body again. See that old version of yourself just transformed and renewed. And all of a sudden, this strength that you didn't have back then, you have now. To deal with it now, to change it now. And imagine the effect that it will have on your entire life. And now float back up and just to see yourself going back through time, back to the present. Floating right back into your body, just noticing how you feel. Letting all the changes take place in the very deepest neurological and chemical and biological levels all the way inside. And maybe you can see that memory just a little differently. Maybe it has a little of a different effect on you than it ever had before. Maybe it's a little easier, a little farther away. Did you bring those resources into the present? You have those resources now that you didn't back then. Allow that change to occur at the very deepest level of your unconscious. So that when you sleep tonight, your unconscious mind will continue to change that old memory deliberately, as you always have to change traumatic memories deliberately. So that it has a very different effect on you than it ever did before. In a moment, I'm going to count from 1 to 5. When I count 4, you can open your eyes, and 5 come back, and just feel so much better now. Just feel so much better now. As I count 1, 2, coming back to the surface. 3, becoming more aware of the room around you. 4, opening your eyes, and 5, coming all the way back to full waking consciousness. Just feeling different and feeling better. Feeling like something might have actually changed. And what if it does change? That's my next question to you. What if it does change? What if changing that memory changes how you feel about things now, that you feel more bold, better, more wonderful? How would that be? If you guys have any questions or comments, just let me know. This is the end of our session. I have another session with my Wednesday night trauma and anxiety group that is actively working on recovering from their trauma. If you'd like to have an appointment with me, and you haven't had a free appointment with me yet, I'm going to put that link in the chat right now. And when we get done with this, I think it will automatically send you there anyway. But I would love to see any of you, if you think this is something you'd like to start working on with me, if you'd like to be a part of this, whether we do private sessions or you join my group or whatever, however we choose to work on this, I would love to see you. And I invite you to come and see me. I only take on 1 client a week at the most. And that's because I give a lot of attention to all of the people that I work with. And anybody that's in the room, there are a few people in the room, and maybe you can attest to this. If you text me, I get back to you within 15 minutes usually. Anybody can attest to that in the room. And if you'd like to come and be a part of this, you see the link there. And I would love to see you. All right, everybody, thanks for coming, and I certainly appreciate it. I certainly appreciate your presence. I appreciate your participation. I appreciate everything about you. And I hope that you just have the best day and night, whether you're watching the live or the recorded. Christina, it was great to have you here. You guys just have the best night. How's everybody feeling? By the way, after that? I meant to ask that. How's everybody feeling after the hypnosis? I meant to ask that. Sherry says it was amazing. So if you want to share that, I'll stay on for just a couple more minutes. But I'd love to hear how you felt about that little. That was just a shallow dive. We didn't really do any deep dives there. So your life may or may not be changed after tonight. Feel good? Lighter, happier, feeling amazing? Yeah. It's great. Relaxed? Excellent. Great. All right, everybody. Have a great night. We'll see you soon. Set an appointment if you really think you need it.